The kitchen faucet drips twice before you catch it. 10:47 p.m. Your phone is face down on the counter, screen still warm from the call that ended 11 minutes ago. The one where a man named Richard Ellison, 44 years old, wire transfer confirmed, said, "Congratulations, you're free," in a voice that sounded like he was reading it off a card. $8,210,000. After taxes, after the lawyers, after the earn-out clause you fought for in April. 6.1 million, sitting in an account you haven't even looked at yet. You're standing at your sink in Dayton, Ohio, wearing the same gray Hanes t-shirt you wore to close the deal over Zoom, and you are washing a coffee mug. Just one mug, because it was in the sink, because that's what you do. Nobody tells you this part. Nobody tells you that the biggest number of your life will arrive on a Tuesday, and by 10:47 that same night, you'll be standing in your socks on cold linoleum, scrubbing a ceramic mug with a chip on the handle, and it will feel like nothing at all. You grew up on Fenwood Avenue, in a rented duplex with a landlord named Gary Pruitt, who raised the rent every March like it was scheduled on his calendar. Your mother worked the overnight shift at a Kroger distribution center, clocking in at 11 p.m. and coming home at 7:15 a.m. smelling like cardboard and cold air. You remember the exact sound of her key in the door. You remember eating cereal for dinner 3 times a week. Not because there was nothing else, but because it was $2.19 a box, and it stretched. You were 11 when you started counting. Not obsessively, just aware. Aware that the lights had a cost, that the water had a cost, that everything had a number attached to it that someone had to answer for. You didn't dream about being rich. You dreamed about the drip stopping, about a landlord who didn't call in March. That's a different kind of dream, and it builds a different kind of person. At 19, you were running a small pressure washing route out of a 1998 Ford Ranger with 161,000 miles on it, charging $80 a driveway, banking maybe $340 a good week. At 23, you had 4 employees and a payroll you made in cash on Fridays at a card table in your garage, because you didn't trust yourself yet to automate something that mattered that much. At 29, you had a commercial cleaning company with 38 employees and contracts with 11 office parks across 3 counties. And you still answered the phone yourself on Saturdays, because a woman named Deborah Kessler, your first real client, once told you that the day you stop picking up is the day you've forgotten why you started. Here is the part nobody sees. While your college roommate, Marcus Doyle, was leasing a BMW 4 Series at 26 and posting it from 4 angles, you were driving the same Ranger with a cracked windshield, because $60,000 you could have spent on that car went instead into 2 more pressure washers and a payment to a man named Andre, who fixed your equipment for cash and never once was late doing it. Marcus called you cheap. He wasn't wrong exactly. He just didn't understand that cheap wasn't the goal. Quiet was the goal. You weren't hiding money, you were hiding intention. There's a difference, and almost nobody can see it from the outside, which is the whole point. By 36, you had a company worth acquiring. Not because it was flashy, it had no app, no brand deal, no Instagram with 40,000 followers, but because the margins were real. The client retention was 94%, and the books, every single one of them, going back to that card table in the garage, were clean. A private equity group out of Columbus started calling in January. You didn't return the first 2 calls. You returned the 3rd, because by then you'd done the math 3 times, and it stopped feeling like a number and started feeling like a decision. The negotiation took 5 months. There was a night in March, 1:20 a.m., where you sat at your kitchen table, the same table your mother bought second-hand off a woman in Kettering for $45 in 2003, and you almost said yes to a lowball offer just to be done with the exhaustion of it. Your accountant, a careful man named Walter Prince, who'd done your taxes since you were 22, called you the next morning and said one sentence: "Tired is not a strategy." You didn't sign for another 11 weeks. You held out for the number that reflected what you'd actually built, not what you were willing to accept out of fatigue. That's the invisible work. Nobody claps for patience. Nobody makes a reel about saying no for the 11th week in a row while your stomach is in knots and your wife, Renee, is asking gently at dinner whether you're sure, whether this is worth it, whether you even remember what Saturdays used to feel like before all this. You closed on a Tuesday in June. $8,210,000. The buyer's team sent a bottle of Dom Perignon to the house. It's still in the fridge, unopened 3 days later, because champagne felt like a scene from someone else's life, not an instruction for how to feel in yours. What you did instead was ordinary, painfully, deliberately ordinary. You picked up your daughter Ivy from Briar Ridge Elementary at 3:15, same as always. She asked if you'd play catch before dinner, and you did. 40 minutes in the backyard with a $6 foam football, because the leather one was still in the garage somewhere under a tarp. You made spaghetti. Renee made the sauce, the same jarred Rayo's she's used for 11 years, because $8 million doesn't automatically buy you a taste for anything fancier. It just buys you the right to not think about the price of the jar, which, honestly, you never really thought about anyway. And then, at 10:47, you found yourself at the sink. This is the part that will make sense only to people who've built something slow. The dishes weren't a metaphor you were performing. You weren't being humble for an audience. There was no audience. There was no camera. There was nobody in that kitchen but you and the drip of the faucet and the low hum of the refrigerator. You washed the mug because it was there, and because washing it was a thing your hands knew how to do without your mind having to be present for it, and your mind, that night, needed somewhere else to be. It went, without your permission, back to Fenwood Avenue, back to your mother's key in the door at 7:15 a.m., back to the exact weight of a $2.19 cereal box in your hand at 11 years old, doing math you shouldn't have had to do. You thought about calling her. It was almost 11. She'd be up. She still keeps the old schedule. Some habits outlive their purpose but never really leave. You didn't call. Not that night. You wanted, for just a few more hours, to hold the number by yourself, quietly, the way you'd held every hard year that led to it. There's a kind of success that gets celebrated in public, the car, the announcement, the number in bold letters. And there's another kind that just sits in your chest at 10:47 p.m., private and enormous, known only to you and the people who watched you not take the easy offer in March. Walter Prince will never post about the call he made that morning. Andre will never know his cash-paid repairs on a cracked-windshield Ranger were, in some quiet accounting only you keep, part of the foundation. Deborah Kessler, wherever she is now, has no idea that a sentence she said to a 26-year-old on a Saturday phone call still lives somewhere in the way you run a company. None of them are in the story anyone will ever tell about this. But they're in yours. You dried the mug with the dish towel hanging on the oven handle, the one with the faded rooster print Renee bought at a Hobby Lobby clearance 6 years ago, and set it in the cabinet, exactly where it always goes. You turned off the kitchen light. The house went dark in the particular way a house does when everyone in it is finally, actually safe, and none of them, except you, even knows it yet. You stood there another moment in the dark hallway, not moving, not thinking anything in words, just feeling the whole shape of it. The duplex, the Ranger, the card table, the 11 weeks of no, settle into something that finally had a floor under it. $8 million changes what's possible. It does not change what you reach for at 10:47 on a Tuesday when the house is quiet and a mug is sitting in the sink. You still washed it yourself.